Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So I have as the title says, a video all about a couple of folk magic books, folk witchcraft books that I can recommend to you. Now this is kind of piggybacking off of one of my recent reels over on Instagram, where I shared, I believe it was 5 books on the practice of folk magic and traditional witchcraft. And so if you are curious what folk magic even is, I do have a video that I will link below or somewhere on the screen up here that you can go check out as well. But yeah, I am going to start off with the more beginner-friendly ones, and then we're heading more into a little bit more advanced type of area. Now, a quick note about advanced books. It's really hard to kind of assess what an advanced book is, because a lot of times you're meant to go and figure things out yourself, especially with folk magic and traditional witchcraft. A lot of the practice or a lot of the experiences come from living experience for actually going out there, working with a spirit and having that spirit help you with gaining more knowledge. A lot of witchcraft, in my opinion, and I know this is, I actually saw the Norse Witch talk about this, a hot take that they did about witchcraft and spirits, which by the way, go check that out if you'd like, because I fully agree with that. I know it was a little controversial for some, but you're going to find a lot of more advanced books. Are they advanced, or is the language just a little bit more difficult? Because truly you're sort of supposed to at that point already kind of go out into the world and, you know, experience things yourself and come up with these kind of practices yourself. So with that kind of in mind, it's a little bit of a ramble. I do have a couple of different books that I do find contain some information that I wouldn't necessarily say are super beginner level, so that's why I think they are categorized as a little bit more advanced. But I feel like these books that I'm about to mention are really great for beginners and advanced and even more seasoned practitioners, just because, you know, I feel like there's just so many good books coming out, and it's always good to kind of brush up on your own knowledge. So yeah, and I'm also going to be sharing a tip, my favorite tip of retaining information in the best possible way. If you read a lot like I do, or if you're kind of maybe trying to figure out how to get into more reading and like retaining that information, my favorite tip is going to be at the end of this video. So without further ado, let's get right into it, after I have a sip of my coffee before it gets cold again. Alright, so the very first book is Folk Witchcraft by Roger J. Horne. Now this one is the very top beginner level. So I read this in a day or two. Now this is, first of all, because the way that it is laid out is quite spacious. It's quite large font. But I found this to be an excellent beginner, like have no idea what folk witchcraft is. This is a great one for you to get your hands on. It's a self-published book, and it has just such a nice entry level of like what witchcraft is, more traditional folk kind of witchcraft, of course. It has a really, really nice focus on the familiar spirit, which I find not a lot of books that are like beginner witchcraft, beginner folk magic books have that. So I found that really, really great. It has some exercises in here. You're talking about some ideas that in my opinion are essential and are foundational. So here we have lore, land, and the familiar spirit. For the solitary practitioner. Now this is the revised and second edition. You might have seen this book, the brown kind of cover that has like that tree growing to the side of it, which I must admit I prefer that cover, but you know, that's neither here nor there. And this one is really, really, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoy Roger's writing style. It's very easy. It's very understandable, basically, right? He has another one that I also really, really like, which is which is called A Broom at Midnight. That's a little bit more, you need to have read this one to kind of get into that one, at least in my opinion. And so this is what I really actually liked about this book, is that it had an introduction of where do we even get this lore from? Where do you get this lore from? Because, you know, you can always just read all these books, but where do you go from there? And this one is a really nice guide on how to actually do research. Yeah, it has some really, really good sources in here. And it also has just a beautiful description of everything in here that I don't find is too difficult or too extravagant or anything like that. It's very, I wouldn't say humble, well, you could maybe say humble, but it's very, you know, down to earth. I really, really like this one. So the second book, and I've read this one a while ago, as in like 3 or 4 years ago. I think I read this in like 2020. Is The Crooked Path: An Introduction to Traditional Witchcraft by Kelden. It has a foreword by Gemma, who, by the way, I adore. So this one is such a lovely introduction type of book for practicing traditional magic, witchcraft, folk magic. Now, I will say, I'm going to kind of use these words a little bit interchangeably in this video. I know this is something that is up to interpretation. Like, some people separate them much more. I kind of see them as like twins maybe, but there's like a few differences. It kind of depends on who you read, to be honest. You're going to see that exchange of using those words quite frequently if you are reading and if you're researching within this field of magic. But about the actual book. Now, Kelden is a great writer. I really like his books as well. I have the Witch's Sabbath one as well. And I really enjoy that he has a lot of exercises. So first of all, we obviously have an introduction. We obviously are going into like what is traditional witchcraft. We've got a little bit of like history, which is always really neat. And then you've got your different tools. You've got, you know, crafting a couple of different things. You've got your basis spellcraft, high and low magic. You've got a lot of definitions. This one is a really, really good all-around book that I find really, really good for starting this practice. This one has, it even has like planetary magic and everything, which, can you see that? Here we go. I haven't, no, actually that's not true. There's a couple of books that are inclusive of this. Bones, Earth and Feather. So this one has it all, in my opinion. This one is, it's a very, very good introduction. Now, I will say, because it has so many different topics, it's not gonna go necessarily super crazy deep into it. And I will say that is the one thing with the Folk Witchcraft by Roger Horne. In my opinion, it's almost a little bit too introductory level, where it's like, I wish he had expanded more. I wish this book was like 3 times the size. And I feel like he, you know, Kelden is definitely someone that if he continued or expanded on something on this topic, I'd absolutely love reading that. But it is such a good beginner. Now, if you're not someone that likes the more exercise type books, because this has a lot of exercises, this might not necessarily be good for you, but I do find these are really, really great books to have. They might take you longer to go through because you are sort of meant to read this, do the exercise, and then once that has worked out, you continue with reading it. But I find that that is almost like a little course. And for the price tag that this is, on the back here it says $17.99, I feel like that much in one book is incredible, with all the exercises and like all the foundation and building up on the foundation and just the range of things that are included in this book. It definitely belongs into your reading list. So this next one I'm super excited to actually show you, and this is the Beginner Witch's Handbook, Essential Spells, Folk Traditions and Lore for Crafting Your Magical Practice by Leah Middleton, also known as the Red-Headed Witch. Also, the cover is stunning. So this one is, in my opinion, such a great one for beginning your practice, especially with a more focus on ancestral veneration, which I cannot think of a single other book that has a focus on more ancestral veneration. And this one is also beautiful. Like, I'm going to quickly pull up one of the, or a couple of, I'll probably also have some b-roll coming throughout here as well. All of Leah's own photography is in here, and I have a very similar taste and aesthetic, let's say, as Leah, and so this is like, it's just stunning. So this book is going to be a introduction with foundational sort of knowledge once again, with just a beautiful focus on creating your own path and giving you the steps on how you can actually forge your own path without taking it from another book or taking it from, you know, like, oh, I practiced this specific magic that person has laid out. Whereas I feel like this one is much more like, here are the elements, here are the foundations, here are the building blocks, and now you can actually go and create your path, which I think a lot of books try to do that, and sometimes it's a little hard to actually do that without having your own sort of bias come through. This one is a great book also because it has just a lot of spells in it as well. So you've got an entire like grimoire section with a lot of traditional kind of spells based on folklore, which I really love. You've got a little bit of background of why this spell kind of is the way that it is. We've got a look at some topics that sometimes are a little bit uncomfortable, like for example, you know, cultural appropriation, or how do you work with uncomfortable ancestors or ancestors that might have had, you know, something that you're not proud of, let's say. It works really, really well through all of those sort of nuanced situations, and yeah, I just cannot recommend this one enough. I feel like books like this are kind of popping up more and more, and I just love that we're starting to see more books that they're not a regurgitation of like what we already know, you know? Like, I have had so many books, especially of course Wicca ones as well, that are just like the same thing over and over again. And I feel like this one is really, really refreshing. So definitely check this one out. Absolutely adore it. In my opinion, I like this one better than the Folk Witchcraft by Roger. And I'm not, you know, comparing necessarily, but I think this one has more meat. I think this one has more like detail, and I think this one is more like beginner and advanced, because I feel like there's more in here that goes a little bit more in depth, and you've got a little bit more explaining and a little bit more fleshing everything out. So that's why I really like this one. Then the next book is an absolute classic, and so this one is called Traditional Witchcraft, a Cornish Book of Ways by Gemma. Now, as you can see, it's got loads of tags. In case you're wondering, the last one by Leah, I didn't have any tags because I've actually read the book as PDF first. So I actually need to still go through this one and transfer all of the tags that I have as a PDF over to the actual book. Anywho, this one is a great one. Now you can get this book on the Troy website. I will link that below because I get a lot of questions, especially over on Instagram, where they're like, oh, I can't find these Troy books. This is a Troy publishing book. And sometimes it can be hard. These are not going to be the books that you find in like Barnes & Noble, for example, or your, you know, local bookstore. These are going to be either like specialized bookstores or of course online. And I get these online. So I got this, the light is changing. I get this one from the Troy website themselves. They ship internationally and shipping's not too bad. I tend to get always, like when I do make an order, I tend to buy like 3 books at least, just to make the shipping worth it. But yeah, anywho, about the actual book. Now this one is a little bit more specific to the Cornish region over in England, and so I still find this book excellent. It has so much diversity in here, as in like it goes over so many different things within your path. You've got the foundational sort of history, you've got a little bit of like, you know, folklore in here, you have the tools, you know, you've got all of that, which I feel like most books, like every single other book, like Leah's book, Roger's book, they all have like what the different tools are. So this one has that too. And then you kind of go into a few more things that I find really fascinating that are based on land and based on the lore from that region. Now you are able to adapt this pretty easily, in my opinion. This one kind of goes into the Buka. So if you are a devotee of the Buka, if you worship the Buka, this is, and if you don't know what that is, it is the devil of the land, let's say, of this region, of this tradition. You are able to adapt. I am adapting, for example, a lot of here because I don't work with that necessarily, but you've got so many resources on different spells. I also love highlighting stuff. I like highlighting my books, and it depends on what type of book it is, but usually I do. It's just got a lot of things in here that, in my opinion, are already a little bit more advanced. You've got a couple of more practices in here that would probably make some people a little bit uncomfortable that are a complete beginner. What I mean by that is, for example, the idea of the devil is something that I know some people, when you first hear that, when you're first introduced, is of course a little bit like, oh my gosh, the devil, you know. But you understand it throughout this book much better, and you kind of understand how to work with these different beings, and you've got some really, really cool rites in here that, again, I think are maybe a little bit more advanced simply because they are a lot of times based outside. In my opinion, a lot of witchcraft should be outside anyhow. However, obviously not everyone has the resources to do that, and so hence why it might not necessarily be super comfortable for someone that is just starting out. Now, we do have topics such as blood sacrifices in here. So again, a little bit more advanced perhaps, but it just has so many good resources, especially for a path that I'm finding myself on more and more. It's just a nice kind of like, oh, this is how Gemma does. Okay, cool, I can adapt this into my own practice. Definitely get this. It is worth it, it really is. As you can see, I love it with all the tabs. And yeah, so the next book that is on our list is Cunning Words, A Grimoire of Tales and Magic by Marshall, the Witch of Southern Light. And so yes, also my copy got a little, you know, pulled through the ringer, but this one is self-published, so you can find this one on Amazon, and I know that Marshall has mentioned there's a couple of different other places that you can get it at, but you can get this in different versions. You can get this hardcover, you can get the soft cover, you can get this with black and white illustrations or color illustrations. But yeah, this one also, it's quite a good size. It's quite chunky. So this one is a really, really interesting one. It's kind of based on storytelling, and it is really based on Marshall's own informed folklore practices. And these are not beings, let's say, that you will have seen in other books or in other practices. These are very much like, in my opinion, kind of like an old grimoire that you would have had, you know, in the 1500s or in the 1700s, where people actually are out communing with spirits and then writing down what that spirit is, you know, bringing across. And that is this book, and I find that fascinating. So inspirational in my opinion as well. So this one, it again is very traditional. It has so much thought put into it as well. Like, you read this book and you're like, oh my gosh, this is possible. But this, it even has a map. I love books with maps. I've never seen a witchcraft book that isn't like a novel with a map, but I adore it. So this one really is a folklore of its own. And in my opinion, again, this one is a great one for you to see how you can shape your own path and how you can do this yourself, basically, in a way. Obviously, this is also a grimoire. So you have a lot of spells in here. You have a lot of rituals in here that you can either take or adapt. But in my opinion, I find this really, really beautiful, and the sigils and everything are gorgeous in here too. The illustrations are all done by Marshall as well. And it's just a very fascinating way of writing a book, like the storytelling method of how this spirit has presented the information and how these different rituals came to be and what informs martials practice. So I think this one is a really, really great addition to your collection. If you are more into a little bit more advanced, this one is definitely more advanced in my opinion. It works for a beginner too, don't mind, you know, me saying that, but I do think it's a little bit more advanced because I feel like you need to already kind of understand where this is coming from, and you need to be able to like make your own logical conclusions about, okay, I can take this and I can adapt this, which a beginner, like a complete beginner, might still have a little hard time to do because it's like, oh, am I allowed to do that? Whereas this one, I feel like is presenting these different like stories essentially, and that is where you get a lot of the ritual and a lot of the magic out of. So there's stories, and then out of that you're like, oh, okay, that's how to do that specific ritual, for example, you know. I'm rambling, but yeah, really, really enjoyed this one, so definitely go check out this book as well. All right, so I wanted to keep this video short. I remember being like, I'm gonna make this like a 15-minute video. I bet it's longer than that already. I'll see how much I can edit together. Maybe it is 15 minutes. But now we have come to the very end of this video, and my number one tip for getting the most out of these books is tabbing. Now, you may already have noticed all of my books, or most of the books, have like a million tabs, and sometimes even highlighted sections. That has been a game changer. I don't know if it is because of, you know, just being used to it from school and university, but tabbing your books, in my opinion, is such a great way to retain information and to be able to then also pull that book out of your shelf. I will have them color coordinated. So I will have, usually I have one color that is, for example, folklore about Germany or my region. So I like to tab that. Then I like to tab generally fascinating or generally very thought-provoking, so I tab that with a different color. And then I like to tab one that is like, I'd like to try this. So those are, for example, rituals or different recipes, and I like to tab those too. Then if I have a specific topic that I'm specifically researching, I like to have a specific color for that too. So that just allows me to have a level of organization, but I also feel like I'm actively, like I'm reading much more actively. I find that being able to read these books and then highlight them and tab them allows me to just focus much better on them. I'm not just like, you know, reading them but not processing it. But if I am actively reading it because I'm out to tab, because I'm like, oh, I need to, you know, I'm looking for information in here, the tabbing just activates that in my brain, where I am much more like, I'm processing the information much better. I'm actually taking it in much better than I have in the past, where I haven't used the tabbing technique. So if you are someone that would like to get into reading and actively processing it a little bit more, I highly recommend tabbing your books. That is already, well, this is probably a super long video, and I've completely forgotten the coffee. It's probably super cold at this point. Oh well. But in any case, I hope that you found this video helpful. I do have every single book listed down below with either the links and of course the title or any further information that I could find in the description box. And if you would like a couple of more in-depth reviews of a couple of these books, I do have some of them, not all, over on my Patreon, which by the way is the best way to support this channel. And of course, if you would like to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video, that helps me out a lot. And without further ado, I'm going to say thank you so much for watching. May you walk with your gods. Bye!